really made me understand how important it is to enjoy every minute on stage with the guys.
In the studios, like Roy was always behind me in the booth behind me. So I'd always, like, when we playing, I'd look back there and there's Leroy.
We missed him a lot in there, you know?
Missed him incredibly. Yeah.
We had some times when we could sit down and, you know, listen to the tracks that we had of his, because we had a lot of music. You know, the record starts with him, the record ends with him.
I've heard him play some of his best stuff on this record. And it was weird because, you know, we were in the studio in Seattle last year. You know, nobody knew, you know, you don't think about that. You don't think about leaving this earth, you know? You just want to keep moving forward. So we weren't thinking that. But the way he was playing, it was almost like he knew, you know? It was the weirdest thing. He was like, hey, I'm leaving this for you guys. You guys need to, you know, grab this stuff and step up your game.
You know, for all the bad, there's also those good, and the good thing is that it is his record. He's on the record, and you know, with any luck, we'll find more tracks of his for records to come.
This is a new song. This song will always belong to Leroy Moore, our good friend, who will always be with us.
All of us were just thrashing, and it was just a noise, you know, because sometimes if you're just trying to be completely spontaneous and honest, there's just nothing but noise. So we were making this noise, and it all just suddenly fell into this perfect groove. So we were just, it's like, and Carter just blasting, and everyone just blowing, and then it suddenly was like, and it was just a great moment.
Wait, you know what I'm saying? Going to another section. Like that, when you did that.
And need to shift gears. Yeah. Right. That was where it should have shifted gears.
We just do it at the end of that.
The way you played it, the way you played it, the first record.
Right. That one, or the weird one?
It was like the weird one.
Yeah, we got it on that.
You went to like, where's my guitar?
Hey, what?
See, that's funny.
And Roy fell in love with that. He was always like, what about that thing? We got to do something with that thing. He was always saying, what about this thing? We need to go back to that, you know. And I never wrote, while he was still alive, I never wrote on top of that. And then Stefan took over his Cry.
I had been listening to it, to a previous older version, and just the music. There were no lyrics or anything. And I came to Dave and was like, we have to work on this. The day he came to me with his lyrics on top of it, I was like, what did you just do? I mean, this is awesome. This is so right on. Leroy was in there, and the album title was in the song, and it was a song that we needed on this record.
Ruskin. We'll be drinking big whiskey while we dance and sing. But when my story ends, it's gonna end with him. Heaven or hell, I'm going there with the crew Ruskin.
We all sat, we ate together, we drank wine, you know, and we all had a great time. We talked about the music, you know, and we were there to work and to enjoy what we're all about, you know, and that's making music and being brothers, you know, because it had been a long time since we had gotten a chance to really connect like that, and we reconnected like we did in the old days, you know, in the early days. We got a chance to touch base with that, to reconnect with that, and it brought some good feelings, man, and again, you can hear that in the music.
Don't cry, baby, don't cry.
You know, Charlottesville is a mysterious place. It's a railroad town, for one thing.
Dave would always say there's something about the soil here, and there's something very fertile about it.
I first came down to Charlottesville. I moved down there in the late 80s. There's a lot of great jazz, a lot of great music that was happening in Charlottesville, and a really welcoming music scene.
All the musicians knew each other. A lot of just jamming going on, you know, different people, you know. It's just like Leroy would invite me in down to some of his gigs and some of the bands he played, and that's the kind of scene that Charlottesville was, all these different kinds of musicians coming together.
Well, for a kid, it was great because a lot of the clubs where live music happened were actually restaurants, like Miller's, which is the bar where we all sort of got our start from. It was a restaurant, so a kid like me, 16 years old, could come in, have a cup of coffee and some nachos and watch like great jazz musicians or folk musicians or rock musicians or whoever it was.
It was a happening scene. So many musicians from all over the world, actually, that had established themselves in Charlottesville and become a part of the community.
The first musician that I ever heard there was Tim Reynolds, that I remember. Tim blew my mind. He was the reason that I went and asked for a job at Miller's. And that's when I heard Leroy and I heard all this great music happening there.
Leroy, I've known Leroy the longest out of everyone in the band. When I bartended, he used to play at Miller's a lot. He is just an amazing jazz player. And then, as I said, the first time I ever heard Leroy play, he was leaning out, he had a few bourbons, and he was leaning up against the bar, and I was making salads in the back.
I remember meeting Leroy and Carter upstairs. I remember asking them to come upstairs, and I played some of my first tunes for Carter and Leroy upstairs at Miller's. And that's sort of the birthplace of the band.
His style of playing guitar with the way he sang, you know, it just something about it that just clicked.
It's a typical situation in these typical times, but we can't do anything about it.
I remember Leroy and I looking at each other and saying, this guy has something. Let's go ahead and add our 2 cents and see where we go with this thing.
I think at that time he might have been a waiter, and he just like had this really long hair. You know, we talked casually or whatever, you know, but I didn't really get a chance to know him. I think he went away to South Africa for a while, and he came back, and he had cut off all his hair. And I didn't recognize him at first, you know, and I remember I went down to this club called Tracks one night, and Tim Reynolds, TR3 was playing, and there was this dude on stage that was like, you know, sitting in singing with him. I was like, wow. This guy can sing right here. And I was like, who is this? And I looked closer, and I was like, that's the dude from Miller's.
I had my own band before this, you know, and we've been playing together for about 3 years or so, and that's pretty much, I guess, how Dave kind of knew me.
I think he was shirtless with a brown leather, like, vest with tassels all coming off of it and a big cowboy hat. And kind of a sight for a 16-year-old kid.
Well, I'd already known Leroy and Boyd. Well, we grew up together. It's my house, then a house, and then his house. And then 5 doors up was Boyd. Yeah, the 3 of us all grew up together.
That's funny.
We used to tease Boyd all the time about his violin playing, because he'd be on the porch, you know, it's like, oh! Stefan, didn't know him, but I knew his dad, and I played with his dad for you know, many, many years. And then his dad approached me one day and said, hey, look, you know, you guys, I hear you're trying to get this band together. Why don't you use my son to play bass?
I was actually, I believe it was the second rehearsal that I sat in on, and I had an upright bass. I didn't know what they were, I didn't know. I was a student, and I was kind of studying upright bass. So I brought my upright. It was horrible. I was trying to play sort of this folky rock, like beat and grooves on top of, with my upright. So I quickly borrowed electric bass, and the rest is history.
We started rehearsing in Carter's basement, in his mom's basement. Then we started rehearsing in my basement. Carter moved into my basement with me, where I was living, my mom's basement. But we used to rehearse down there. And I remember they were working on one song. I think Tripping Billy's actually was the song.
We were about, you were standing underneath us, we were not getting nothing.
I was writing the tune and the melody at my house, and I called my girlfriend in Africa, and I played it for her over the phone. She told me it sounded like Hillbillies on Acid, so I named it that. That's where the name came from.
Roy said we should get someone to play violin on this. Boyd was the person who came through, and he sat in with us a couple times.
I started with classical music, and I studied for about 8 years or so, and I then, just sort of had this idea in my head, about really being in a rock band.
I went there in the first rehearsal, and we just started playing. I was like, oh my God. It's like, oh my God. It's just like, we all, I guess, realized that we had stumbled upon something, that was really cool.
Dave just started putting musicians together that he knew from Miller's, basically, I think, and from around town, and this is who he chose to be in the band, and that's how it started. And they just started doing their little gigs, and it was so powerful and great, and people just really picked up on it.
I met the Dave Matthews Band when I walked into the Bayou in Georgetown in D.C. And I went in there, and within like the first minute, I was floored. I just could not believe what was coming off that stage. Saxophone, fiddle, acoustic guitar, bass and drums. It was something I'd never heard before. I mean, no one had heard it before.
We started playing every Tuesday in a little club called Eastern Standard.
They had like 40 people every Tuesday night come out to see us, and that's how we pretty much started as a band. Just playing there for drinks and food and whatnot.
So then we moved to a bigger place called Tracks, and we played there every Tuesday. And then pretty shortly, we sold that place out at like 1,000 tickets a week. We do little excursions up and down the East Coast.
We'd play any place that would have us. Small clubs, frat houses, street fairs.
We're the Dave Matthews Band. That's definitely the biggest bunch of people we ever collectively stood up in front of.
They'd be playing 3 shows at a day sometimes. They'd play an outdoor festival, they'd play some sorority, and then play a club later that night.
We did pretty much everything. I think we played at an amusement park, if I'm not mistaken, one time.
We went to Canada once. We went to Toronto, and we went into the lobby of the hotel, and I heard some guy who was in there at the front desk, and he asked the guy behind the front desk, he was like, is there a circus in town? And I turned to BT, I said, he thinks we're in the circus.
The early years with the band were certainly a little more grueling probably back then, all living in a van together.
The van, there was band and crew and equipment.
It was cramped, and it was smelly, and there were generally people sleeping on top of you. And not in a good way.
Going across country in blizzards to make it to a gig. We never missed a gig. We had a lot of them, so it was, we hit the road, and we hit the road hard.
When we got the van, that was kind of like a big deal. We were like, this is it. We're a band. It was a really amazing time for us, and it was, and musically, playing as much as we played, we really honed in on something.
We were standing in front of the classic red van. This was the main means of transportation for D&B for the first 3 or 4 years, I think.
Just imagine 12 guys sitting in a van after a show, sweaty, stinking, and then on top of that, you add whatever fast food restaurant we stop at, we end up keeping all that stuff in the car.
There was always like little hidden pockets. People had their choice little areas where they would hide food.
Cabbage and broccoli and lettuce and whatever you got in there. And all these things combined start to take its toll as far as the atmosphere.
Sometimes we would go on at midnight. We would finish at 4 a.m. and we would go to a hotel and sleep until 10 or 11, and then we'd proceed to get in a van and drive to the next show. where we would, yeah, unload